Hello. Nice to see you all here tonight. Begin with the verse of the Kesa. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. I wear the Tathagata's teaching, freeing all creations. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. I wear the Tathagata's teaching, freeing all creations. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. I wear the Tathagata's teaching, freeing all creations. The Gata of Atonement. All evil karma ever committed by me since of old, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my body, mouth, and thought, now I atone for it all. All evil karma ever committed by me since of old, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my body, mouth, and thought, now I atone for it all. All evil karma ever committed by me since of old, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my body, mouth, and thought, now I atone for it all. Fragrance of this incense invites the awakened mind to be present with us now. The fragrance of this incense fills our room, protects and guards our minds from wrong thinking. The fragrance of this incense unites us with precepts, concentration, and insight. We offer it for all beings. Homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. I go to the Buddha for guidance. I shall become one with the Buddha. I resolve that I shall each day follow the way of life he laid down for us to walk and awaken to his supreme wisdom. I go to the Dharma for guidance. I shall become one with the Dharma. The gates of Dharma are manifold. I vow to enter them all. The goal of wisdom is ever beyond. I shall attain it. I go to the Sangha for guidance. I shall become one with the Sangha. In the spirit of universal fellowship and as a member of the Sangha, I pledge myself to strive for the enlightenment of all beings. Metta Sutta. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upward to the skies, downward to the depths, outward and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, sitting or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into the world of suffering. May I be happy and well. May no harm come to me. May I learn compassion. May all my friends, family, and those I love be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all those troubled in body, mind, and spirit be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all those who have hurt me in body, mind, and spirit be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all those I have hurt in body, mind, and spirit be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all my enemies be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all living beings be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. So we'll meditate. We'll do a breath meditation tonight. So I'll talk to you about this a little bit more later. I decided on Wednesdays for a while I should do some sort of real kind of step-by-step instruction in Buddhism and in meditation. So we're going to start with just a real basic breath meditation. So get into whatever your meditation posture is. Sit up straight, close your eyes, or gaze softly at something in front of you. And as the sound of the bell fades, take a few deep breaths. Be aware of how you're sitting. Make sure you're upright. You want to be upright but not rigid, relaxed but not slumped. And let your breath just settle into a comfortable rhythm. So focus on the out breath, kind of extending the out breath a little bit. And just follow each breath. So we'll focus on concentrating on the breath. So you want to try to keep your attention pretty closely on each out breath. And you can do this by counting the breath. So breathing in, breathe out, count one. Extend that one for the whole duration of the out breath. And let the out breath be kind of long. When we extend the out breath, it tends to calm the mind and calm the body. And when you count 10 out breaths, start over again at 1. Anytime the mind connects to something else, something that's not the breath, just let go of that and come back to the breath. Whatever arises into awareness, whether it's sounds, sensations, memories, thoughts. Anything that comes up, we can just let it pass or let it be. Thoughts and things like that, you can just let them go. Physical sensations you might need to let be. Sometimes sounds and noises, just have to let them be there. There's no need to push anything away or cling to anything, change anything. If you notice the attention has wandered for a while, you can just take a few deep breaths again. That'll help refocus your awareness on the breath. And then just let the breath settle back to natural. And then follow the breath a little more closely. Notice as you breathe in, there's the beginning of the in breath. The breath continues, the lungs feel full. The out breath begins, it continues, the lungs feel empty. The in breath begins. So we observe each breath independently, breathing one breath at a time, observing one breath at a time. And then we begin to follow the breath continuously. So the end of one breath is the beginning of the next. Stringing them together like a string of beads. Each bead its own separate bead, and yet all strung together as one. Same way with the breath. Notice how as the mind starts to settle down, the breath becomes calmer. As the breath becomes calmer, the body and mind become more calm. And if you like, you can make this sort of a mantra as you breathe out, thinking, may my breath be calm. So let your breath grow lighter and more subtle. To end this meditation, take a few deep breaths. Be aware of where you are, your surroundings. The bell will ring twice. And traditionally, when it rings the first time, bring your hands together in front of your heart. And when it rings the second time, bow. It's a little dark in here. I should turn on some more light, but you can see me, right? So, it's school started today at Stetson, and I've been thinking for a while that I needed to do something a little bit more intentional with Wednesday nights. A little difference between Wednesday and Sunday, and trying to decide what that was. And it occurred to me this week that, school starting and all of that kind of stuff, that there's sort of a new beginning going on. And when I first thought about this, I remembered that a few years ago, one of the UU churches asked me to talk about new starts or fresh starts or something like that. And I did. I said, oh, maybe I should go back and look at that and see if it's still relevant and I could talk about that. And then I thought, no, it would be better to think in terms maybe of using Wednesdays as a time to kind of go over the foundations of Buddhism. It's good to talk about these things once in a while. And so, we're still in the rainy season, the Wasa time in Southeast Asia. You'd be doing a special series of Dharma talks about temples and that sort of thing. So this is a good time for it for a number of reasons. Part of which being that I know that there are people who are coming to these online services that I hadn't really seen before, and it just doesn't hurt to have a foundation. So tonight I'm going to just kind of introduce, like, what is this Buddhism stuff? Where did this come from? And we'll go from there. So it'll probably take us through the next couple of months to get through the kind of the basic foundation things. So there was an archaeological discovery a few years ago in Lumbini, Nepal, which is where the Mahadevi temple is. And this is the temple that marks the spot where the Buddha was born. And the temple is basically a big archaeological dig, and it's very interesting. I've been there, and on the outside it looks like a really big temple, and then you go inside and there's an archaeological dig there, and lights and boardwalks where you can kind of walk above where they're excavating, the old buildings from monasteries and stuff like that. But there was this archaeological discovery not long ago. They had found apparently some wood, bits of a tree that was under this stone that marked the place where the Buddha was born. And so, and they carbon dated it. And so based on this, we can now be reasonably certain that the historical Buddha was actually born 500 or 600 years BCE, which is what the way the story goes. So it was kind of nice to have that story kind of confirmed by modern science. So most of you probably know the man we call the Buddha was born Siddhartha Gautama, and he's referred to as a prince. His father, Saddhodana, was basically the head of a clan known as the Sakyans. So Suddhodana was sort of like a king, but not exactly. The structure, the social structure, political structure was a little bit different than what we would normally think of as the feudal system, but similar enough. And so the story goes that, as was the custom at the time, when his mother was ready to give birth, she traveled toward her parents' home to have her child. So Suddhodana lived in northern India, and what is now northern India. These were kind of irrelevant terms at the time. But her parents lived in what is now southern Nepal, and so she was going there, and along the way she stopped to rest in a grove of flowering trees. And she was standing beneath one of those trees, holding onto a branch, and suddenly Siddhartha Gautama was ready to be born. And so he came into the world, and according to legend, this newborn infant took 7 steps in each direction, with lotus blossoms springing up from his footsteps. And then he pointed to the heavens and exclaimed, "I am the one, the world-honored one." So if you go to White Sands Buddhist Center, and out there in the grounds, there's a statue, as a pillar. On top of the pillar is this rather large baby pointing at the sky, and that's what that image is. So when this happened, the heavenly beings, the gods and devas, were exultant about this. They recognized that there had been this miraculous birth. And there was a seer named Asita, and he witnessed the devas rejoicing. And so when Siddhartha's mother went back to the palace, Asita went to visit, and Siddhartha was brought to him for a blessing, and Asita was immediately aware of his importance. But as he looked at the baby, he started to cry, started to weep. And the Sakyans there who were gathered around were concerned, and they said, "Is there danger for our prince?" And Asita said, "I foresee the prince no harm. But as for me, my life here has no long remainder. I won't get to hear the Dharma of this one with the peerless role. That's why I'm stricken, afflicted, and pained." So Siddhartha's father, the king, invited 108 holy men, including Asita, to bless the prince and to make predictions about his future. And most of them said that he would either grow up to be a great king who would unite all of India, or, like Asita predicted, be a great religious leader who would liberate all beings. Well, Suddhodana didn't really like the great religious leader idea. He liked the king idea. So he did everything he could to prepare Siddhartha for life as a political leader, basically. Had him raised in luxury and privilege, and had him taught how to govern and all the martial arts and all this kind of stuff. And later on, the Buddha would explain that he had lived in a state of total refinement in 3 palaces that his father had built for him. He said, "My father even had lotus ponds made in our palaces, one where red lotuses bloomed, one where white lotuses bloomed, and one where blue lotuses bloomed. His sandalwood, perfume, and clothing were of the finest materials. The sunshade was held over him constantly to protect him from cold and dust and things like that. And during the 4-month rainy season, he was entertained by minstrels and dancers. And even his servants got better food than most people got." But there was at least one event that foreshadowed his interest in the holy life. So at the beginning of the growing season every year, his father would provide over a ceremonial plowing ceremony. Basically, they would have an ox garlanded with flowers, and there was this jewel plow, and it was sort of symbolically, the king would symbolically open up the ground for the rice planting and so on. And so Siddhartha's attendants took him to watch and put him down beneath the shade tree to watch the festivities. So Siddhartha watched his father walking behind this jewel plow, and the attendants dancing and singing, and everyone seemed really happy. But this boy saw that the ox that pulled the plow didn't seem happy. And as this was going on, there were birds flying down to eat the worms and insects that were revealed as the ground opened up. And as he watched this and realized the significance of this cycle of life and death, this young boy spontaneously entered jhana, another deep meditative state. So at 16, Siddhartha was married to a beautiful princess named Yasodhara, and they lived comfortably in the Sakyan capital. And even though they lived very comfortably and they had everything they needed, and he had this pretty wife and all of that, he became disenchanted with this life. And later on, he would say, although I was endowed with such good fortune, the thought occurred to me when an untaught, run-of-the-mill person, subject to aging, sees another who is aged. He is horrified and disgusted, oblivious to himself that he is also not beyond aging. And so he says, seeing that I was also subject to aging, my typical young person's intoxication with youth entirely dropped away. And then later on, he's had the same thoughts about illness and death. He said the healthy person's intoxication with health, the living person's intoxication with life entirely dropped away. So this was pretty interesting for somebody who'd had basically no spiritual instruction to recognize that there was going to be, despite his station in life and all his wealth and all of that stuff, that he was going to experience illness and old age and dying. And so would his family, his wife and his father and so on. And so there's a story that you may have heard about Siddhartha encountering 4 divine messengers. The story goes that he was in his palace and he was not allowed to leave the palace wall without an attendant, and they would send somebody ahead to make sure that he didn't see anything unpleasant. And so, but somehow or another, he went and got out, and he's on one trip, he saw an old person and then a sick person and a dead person and finally a holy man. So the story is probably mythical rather than historical. The Buddha told a lot of stories about his life as a bodhisattva, his life growing up. He didn't tell that one, so it's probably more symbolic than historic. But he did experience this sort of religious conversion idea. He realized that his wealth and power didn't spare him from the stress of living and dying. And so he determined to find a path to peace. And he said at one point later on, he said, being myself subject to birth, aging, illness, death, and sorrow, I had sought happiness in that which was also subject to birth, aging, illness, death, and sorrow. And then the thought occurred to me, what if instead I was to seek that which is not born, does not age or grow ill, the sorrowless, the deathless, unbinding nirvana? So that was the beginning of his spiritual search. He had this realization that he was subject to suffering, and that and then he had this feeling that there was something that was not. And so he decided he would look for that. There's a key Buddhist teaching that explains how the cycle of suffering works, and it's called the 12 Factors of Dependent Origination. And it talks about how everything is preconditioned to something else. And I'm not going to go into it now, but we'll go into it a little bit later on. But in a nutshell, it says that ignorance is a precondition for all of our dukkha, meaning the Buddhist word that means stress or suffering. So not knowing what led to stress and suffering, he went to, that's that ignorance. And so he went to look for a way to end that ignorance. So the cycle of stress and suffering, coming back to stress, is called samsara. And getting out of that loop is nirvana. So as long as ignorance persists, the cycle continues. So the Buddha wanted to unbind from that particular cycle of stress. This is what nirvana means. It means unbinding. So becoming free from samsara. Unbinding, it also means extinguishing. And some of you probably heard me talk about this before, but the idea is that in the way they saw things in ancient India, fire, like in the candle, has a relationship to its fuel, and it's kind of an agitated relationship. And so that's where the heat and all that stuff comes from. And when the fuel is all gone, the fire is unbound from it. And so the idea was that if you could stop fueling the fire, if you could stop creating fuel for existence, then you would become unbound. So at some point, he had seen and heard about people who had dedicated their lives to finding a way out of samsara, to find a way to stop fueling the fires of coming and going. And he felt like he had what it took to follow that path. So at age 29, he shaved off his hair and beard and put on the robe of a mendicant and left the palace. And he went to a yogi and he asked for instruction in meditation practice. And it didn't take him long to master everything the teacher had to offer. But he felt that the teaching didn't lead to complete transcendence. And so he moved on to another teacher. And again, he mastered the teachings, realized this wasn't going to get him to nirvana. He eventually went into the forest to practice very austere asceticism, meditating through all manner of pain and deprivation. Spent the night in cemeteries and other scary places where it's hard to sleep in order to conquer fear, learning to live on very small quantities of food and a few drops of water every day and things like that. So eventually, as a result of these austerities, eventually his limbs, he became so thin that his limbs were like the jointed segments of vines. And his spine stood out like a string of beads. He said his ribs were like the rafters of a ramshackle old barn. His scalp was withered like a gourd dried in the wind. And if he rubbed his limbs with his hands like this, the hair would fall off. He was so undernourished. So after 6 years of striving, he fell to the ground in a faint, completely exhausted. And he might have died right then and there, except this young goat herd happened upon him and milked one of his goats directly into Siddhartha's mouth. Well, no contemplative had ever strived harder or endured more than he had. But even with these extreme practices, Siddhartha realized that he had not attained any superior human state. And so he began to, or any exceptional knowledge or wisdom. So he started to wonder if there could be some other path to awakening. And he realized that he'd been foolish to weaken his body and mind with these austerities. And so a young woman was on her way somewhere to make an offering of rice and milk, and saw him, realized he was a holy man, offered it to him, and he accepted it. And he started going out every morning for alms, trying to rebuild his body and mind. And I'll return to these guys later, but when he was practicing these asceticism, these forms of asceticism, there were several others who recognized that he was really determined. And so he had kind of a small entourage of these ascetic companions who traveled around with him. And we were determined to stick there with him because when he figured it out, they wanted to be there. Well, they saw him accepting milk and rice and going for alms rounds again, and they thought he'd given up. And so they left him. But we'll encounter them later on. So one day when he felt strong again, he came to a nice spot along the shore of the Naranjara River, and he prepared a seat of straw beneath a tree and sat down to meditate. And he was determined this time he was going to achieve this goal. And he said, "My blood may dry up, my bones crumble to dust, but I will not rise until I achieve awakening." So as he sat, he went deeper and deeper into meditation. And the stories tell us that he did battle with Mara, with the forces of temptation throughout his meditations. Mara basically it means death, and it's the sort of the personification of death, and by extension, the personification of the evil that leads to this, that keeps you in the cycle of suffering, right? So Mara didn't want him to succeed because, Mara wants to keep people being born so they can die, right? So he sent daughters to seduce him and armies of demons to frighten him, but Siddhartha was undeterred. And finally, Mara challenged his right to enlightenment. Said, who do you think you are that you have this, that you should be allowed this, that you are capable of this awakening? And when he asked this question, The Bodhisattva saw the unfolding of his countless lives leading to this point, and Siddhartha reached down and touched the ground. And he said, "The earth is my witness." And when this happened, Mother Earth came to his side and vanquished Mara and his armies. And if you look at, there, you'll see a lot of times there's statues of the Buddha in meditation pose in one hand, like on his knee, sort of reaching down to touch the earth. That's that moment when he awakened. So after seeing his own past lives, Siddhartha witnessed beings passing away and reappearing according to their karma. And finally, he directed his mind to the knowledge of the ending of the mental processes that lead to suffering. And here's what he said. He said, "I discerned this is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. This is the way leading to the cessation. And my heart, thus knowing, was released from becoming, released from ignorance." And so with release, I discern that birth is ended, holy life fulfilled, the task done. There's nothing further for this world. And so as the morning star arose, signaling the breaking day, this was after 7 days of meditation, Siddhartha, sitting beneath the tree, was no longer a seeker of enlightenment. He was a Buddha. He was the perfectly awakened one. So I think it's good to start our own spiritual search with a discussion of the Buddha's teachings, the story of his own spiritual search. And I hope that this can be a source of inspiration for your spiritual journey. I hope you'll enjoy hearing more about the sort of the basics of Buddhism. Where do we go from here? It's very interesting. There's a lot of places to go from this point. So let me see if you have any questions now. I don't see anything. I see a lot of people saying hello and hello back to you. I'm gonna stand up for just a second and look at my computer, because it looks like, sometimes I don't see the posts here until quite a while after you've made them. So I'm just going to double check and make sure I haven't been asked a bunch of questions. The mysterious sound, the mysterious background noise. Well, I don't know what to do with that. I think it's something in my computer. So I'm considering getting a laptop that's a little kind of dedicated to this sort of thing. But anyway, I didn't see any other questions, so we'll go ahead and do the dedication. Buddha nature pervades the whole universe, existing right here now, and offering flowers, candles, and incense, hearing the Dharma and training the mind. Great merit is attained. We dedicate this merit to the great Master Shakyamuni Buddha, the all-pervading and everlasting three treasures, to the 16 guardians and all protectors of the Dharma and their relations throughout space and time, to all ancestors of this Sangha and all beings in the Dharma world. May penetrating light dispel the darkness of ignorance. Let all karma be resolved in the mind flower bloom in eternal spring. May the Dhamma body maintain strength and health, and years of life be lengthened for all teachers of this Sangha. May their vows be fully realized, and may they live in perfect peace with Buddha Dharma. We pray for all those suffering from violence and those who grieve for them, for those living in oppression, for all who are imprisoned who should be free, for all refugees from violence, hunger, and catastrophe, man-made or natural. We pray for the health and well-being of those suffering from diseases of body, mind, or spirit, those working toward the healing of those afflictions. We pray for those suffering from COVID-19 and those working to minister to them, and to those grieving for those lost to this pandemic. At this time, we have members of our congregations, friends, and loved ones suffering from disease and grieving for lost loved ones. We pray for them and send loving thoughts their way. May they all be serene through their troubles, and may we realize the enlightened way together. Sabbe sata sadahantu avera sukha jivino katang punya phalang mahang sabbe bhagi bhavantu te. May all beings always live happily, free from animosity. May all share in the blessings that spring from the good we have done. Three bows. And to you. And I'll talk to you Sunday or tomorrow.